Hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy's podcast studio. And we are super excited to have David Steinman on our show today. And he is going to be talking about toxins in children. He wrote a book about it. And David, welcome to our show.
Hey, good afternoon.
Yes. So welcome, and tell us a little bit about your history and how you ended up on our podcast.
Oh, how do I encapsulate a history? 4 or 5 decades of working in chemical toxins. I was working in chemical toxins when it wasn't cool, when no one knew about it, when people couldn't talk about each other, to each other about what was causing their illness, when there was no internet, when we were all isolated. I wrote a book called Diet for a Poisoned Planet, which was a bestseller. And it was one of the first books to expose what was in our food supply, all the different chemicals and what they meant for our health. And we had so few studies. This was in the 90s, which seems like ancient times, and things have changed so much. But that's when I began. And today, chemical toxins and their impact are hitting everyone, because we've heard of PFAS chemicals in our drinking water, because too many of our friends and neighbors and kids are getting cancer. So I wrote my newest book, Raising Healthy Kids, Protecting Your Children from Hidden Chemical Toxins, which is as much for the parents' health and adult health as it is for kids' health, because really most of us are really just big kids when it comes to our health and physiology.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us a little bit about your book.
So Raising Healthy Kids is a black belt course in protecting yourself in the chemical toxin jungle. And it's a 360-degree view from the foods you eat, including fast foods and how to get your kids to eat fast foods and healthy foods, to personal care products, cosmetics that mom needs to know about for her own health and that parents need to know about as their kids become tweens and then start using all this stuff. How to know what's safe in our communities. How do we know our community is safe? How do we know that our school is safe? What do we do about our drinking water? Who's telling us the truth? How do we stay on a budget? What if we have no budget? How do we stay healthy? How do we have deep caring? How do we as parents become the change that our children need to see? And most of all, how do we as a country start to see that chemical toxins are beyond red and blue, that they're affecting every family, and that legislation and actions to protect ourselves and our communities, this is not political. This is really, at this point, survival for us as individuals and also for our planet. I'm especially proud that a lot of what I wrote about was tested in Cancer Alley, Louisiana, which is that stretch of river between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Mm-hmm. And it's the most industrialized in corridor in the Western Hemisphere, with about 200 plants. And people there are not rich. Most of them are Black. And when I wrote the book, I wanted to be sure that everything I said and recommended could be done by anybody, whether you have a budget or like me and so many activists and other folk who don't even have a budget, and we're still trying to do it, and we're doing it, and we're protecting ourselves. That's what my book is about.
So tell us about some of the big ones. If you had to list, 3 of the biggest toxins that we need to not expose our children to, or keep them away from, what would they be?
Well, number one is our PFAS, or forever chemicals. These are chemicals that are used in stain-resistant clothing, water-resistant goods. They're used in almost everything to make them more durable because they don't break down. That's why they're called forever chemicals. So just, have you ever wondered, for example, how you can buy, I know you don't buy processed foods, God forbid, you don't buy processed foods, but just let's imagine for a moment. Have you ever wondered why when you buy processed foods and they come in these little plastic containers and you put them in the oven at 400 degrees for 30 minutes, the plastic barely melts.
Yeah.
Think about it. That's because of the forever chemicals. Now you're causing a heat reaction between the packaging and the food, and they're going to migrate from the food into your body. That's why we all have forever chemicals. So what I tell folks with forever chemicals, because probably about half of the people listening to this show will have them in their drinking water. I mean, half of the people in America will have them in their drinking water. And what I tell folks is, you can spend a few $100s on testing your tap water, but it's probably more important for you to filter it right now and not worry so much about the testing, because you can be sure that if your water doesn't have forever chemicals, it will still have disinfectant byproducts that cause cancer too. Now, forever chemicals can be filtered out through reverse osmosis systems, which could run about $300. But say you don't have $300 and you're on a budget, like so many of us. Did you know that the zero water pitcher filter, and I don't get any advertising money for saying this. I'm saying this because it's true. For example, the zero water pitcher filter for $30 filters out the forever chemicals, among so many others. So don't think that you have to be helpless in the face of this. And just one last story. I write about in Raising Healthy Kids, Hoosick Falls, New York, one of the first communities to be impacted knowingly by forever chemicals that were in their well water. I interviewed one family where the wife drank Pepsi all her life, but her husband likes tea, sweet tea. And he would make that tea from the tap water, whereas the Pepsi she got was bottled elsewhere. He came down with kidney cancer and died. She's still alive. And when we were talking and we did the interview, this was for 30 years he drank that water. And then they discovered after 30 years that the wells in their town were contaminated. So the things we need to know could be so simple. If he had filtered his water, known to filter his water, he would have been alive longer. He would have been able to be with his grandson and his son. And these are just typical folks like you and me who just didn't know something. So forever chemicals are the big one. But you asked for three altogether. So phthalates. Phthalates are huge too. Phthalates are microplastics. And they're definitely used in cosmetics to fix fragrances into them and to change the texture of the cosmetic to make them a little more, water can be molded, but you know what water feels like. Cosmetics don't feel like water. They feel like different kinds of goops and gunk that's put together to make a more sinewy kind of fluid, and phthalates are part of that. So if you ever see products like with fragrance on them, that's a product that will have phthalate. Now we've taken on companies. I'm the chief officer of the Healthy Living Foundation, and we've actually brought legal actions against companies for selling products with undisclosed phthalates. But you can't always know that a product has phthalates, but phthalates would be the second big issue. And the way that you deal with phthalates in your life, well, with personal care products, you avoid products with fragrance. That's number one, because fragrance is so much associated with phthalates. In fact, when my kids started to go into their teen years and they started buying colognes and stuff because, they were dating and all that, son comes home with English leather cologne. Like, I don't know how many generations of boys have been spraying English leather cologne. I mean, it started with Joe Namath, was it not Joe Namath, but one of those commercials back in the 60s for English leather. It's been going on a long time.
Right. Yeah.
Father came home with Canoe fragrance, measured them in the lab for their phthalates. They were loaded. So we got our kids to start using colognes and stuff with essential oils.
Right.
But you also have to remember, teens don't learn really quickly. When kids are teens, they kind of think they know it all and that you don't know anything. So sometimes the way you have to counter this is to actually buy the product. You can't say, oh, well, you should be using this, dear. and think they're going to actually do it. But if you put the better product in their hands, they're going to use it. So what's a better product? It's really simple, organic. Now, cosmetics we don't think of as being organic, but you will find many cosmetics now, including shampoos, bubble baths, uh, fragrance, makeup, foundation, that do contain certified organic ingredients. These are so much less likely to be contaminated with phthalates. I'm not saying they'll be perfect, because these are kind of, if we have forever chemicals, phthalates are everywhere chemicals, but you can markedly reduce your exposure through your cosmetic choices. So I go into a lot of detail on that. What are the marker ingredients you need to look for when you're buying cosmetic products? So those are two. I would say the third one, I'm going to be a little more general, and rather than give you a specific chemical, I'm going to say pesticides. We don't really, how do I put it? The things we're talking about are hidden. And when people don't see things, it's natural for them to deny them. Like, how did I get sick from something I can't even see? But when our group has tested, for example, every bakery product we've tested, it will contain organophosphate pesticides, which affect the nervous system in our kids and in adults. So pesticides in our food supply are a huge problem. And again, organics are the solution. So a lot of this sounds complicated, like, what do I do about genetically modified ingredients? And what about Roundup, glyphosate, which seems to be in all these different products? But if you keep the keyword organic in what you're doing, it's really a marker for a lot of different things that are going on in the consumer marketplace and for your health. Like, if you buy organic foods, they won't have genetically modified ingredients. If you buy organic foods, they won't have the food dyes. I could have listed food dyes, I suppose, as the third big one. Let's put them number 4 and give you a bone. Give it the list.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
true. Yeah.
Because they can cause ADHD too. They can be cancerous. But if you buy organic, you're going to largely eliminate the pesticides, the food dyes, the phthalates, the dioxane, and other harmful ingredients, without always having to think about, did I eliminate them? Now, organics aren't perfect, and no one should think that, what I'm saying is like rose-colored glasses. I've actually looked at thousands of monitoring reports for organic foods, and they're so much cleaner. Plus, there was a study done in Washington State where kids were given organic foods in lieu of conventionally sourced foods. And the levels of those pesticides I was talking about, the organophosphates in their urine, disappeared completely from their urine. Now, that means kids are going to be better behaved, they're going to be smarter, and they're going to be healthier. You notice these things right away as a parent or as an adult who's making these changes. And that's because the human body responds almost immediately to changes in its environment. The messenger RNA is actually our radars, and they kind of detect what's going on inside the body or the environmental chemicals we're being exposed to. Messenger RNA communicates with DNA, which then modifies the genes or talks to the genes and tells which genes to start working and which ones not, and which ones to down-regulate and so on. So
It looks, David, hold on just a second. It looks like we have a comment. Janet, you want to read that comment and who it's from?
Oh, Michelle Collins just commented that she was guilty or is guilty of non-organic cosmetics. I don't know very many women that aren't. Or,
I didn't know there was such thing as organic.
Well, you know what? This is a huge deal, because I'm not trying to guilt anyone, by the way,
Right.
because we're all teaching each other.
Right.
But studies have shown, here's the bad news. Studies have shown that when mom uses too many cosmetics with phthalates in them prior to pregnancy, her child will lose 5 to 7 IQ points. Phthalates are endocrine disruptors, which means they interfere with testosterone production in the body, and they imitate the hormone estrogen. So your child will also be born with greater risk for infertility, testicular cancer. Their gender behavior may be modified more towards the feminine in boys, and could be hyperfeminized in girls as well, and they will be impacted as well with their fertility, their risk for breast cancer. So the good news is, again, recent studies have shown that when you start using safer cosmetics, your markers for cancer in women, this study was done on women, it's in the published peer-reviewed literature. The study that was done on women showed their markers for breast cancer went way down after they stopped using cosmetics with so many phthalates and other harmful ingredients. Now, you say, well, what are cosmetics with that are organic? Actually, if you start to Google organic cosmetics or even go on Amazon, you'll find there's a whole category now of organic cosmetics. You can find good foundations, for example, blush, makeup, shampoos, skin lotions. You can find great products now. And so I do want people to know that. And the other thing is, when you start using organic products, other published peer-reviewed studies show that your kids will have less diabetes, less obesity, lower risk for cancer. Mom's pregnancy will have fewer complications, and her kids will be at less risk for being born with genital malformations and other birth defects. And dad will have healthier and more sperm, all from an organic diet, all in published and peer-reviewed studies. Not that organic is perfect, it's just a big, significant move you can make towards increasing your own health span and your children.
That's awesome. So when I interrupted you, and I apologize, David, we just like to
No
get to
problem.
our comments from our listeners and viewers.
Sure.
You were talking about messenger RNA and how it goes into DNA. Will you go back into that and kind of start from a little bit the beginning?
So people often ask, well, how long does it take for these things to impact my health? And I tell them it happens right away. So I talked about those breast cancer markers that went down when women started using safer cosmetics. That's because the messenger RNA is picking this up right away. And it's telling the genes, hey, stop producing all these toxic forms of estrogen. See, if you put xenoestrogens or fake estrogens into the human body, it through the messenger RNA, it tells the DNA, start producing this very toxic form of estrogen. It's known broadly and generally as a form of estradiol. And there are different forms of estrogen in human bodies. You probably know estriol, estradiol, estrone, and so on. But estradiol is the most potent and long-lasting. And then it can be even made more potent and long-lasting when you start smearing on your skin or ingesting foods with these endocrine disruptors. So I say the impact will be almost immediate. And so in other words, there's hope for everyone to be healthier.
Well, and we shouldn't really be surprised about this, how the body reacts immediately, because Jen and I often talk about on our podcast and just in general that, we always hear about people say, well, I've got a genetic predisposition to have diabetes, or I've got a genetic cardiovascular disease runs in my family, so my genes are screwed, basically. But what I like to tell people is we can't change our genetics, but we can change the way our genes are expressed. And what you're talking about is an environmental. Basically what you're talking about is we do that all the time based on what we put in our body, how we sleep, all the environmental around us. Epigenetics is basically what it is.
Yeah, and what you're bringing up is nature nurture. And instead of being so deterministic and blaming everything on genes, that's just 5% of the story. Right. The rest of it is how we treat our genes. Right. Because you'll notice as you just to give you an example, if you've ever, as you're married and live with someone for a long time, you notice that you nurture each other, and you become a little bit of them and they become a little bit of you. Also, there are people who talk about, well, my genes are messed up and my dad had heart disease and my mom had diabetes. But you know what? I was talking to, for example, a Hispanic friend of mine, and she said, it really wasn't my genes. It's the way we were taught to eat from through family tradition that was impacting our genes. Our genes were actually pretty good. Right. It was the diet, but we all thought it was our genes, but it was just because we also handed down our culinary traditions as well, and those could be pretty bad. So you know what? The other weird thing is when you talk about nature, nurture, and going back to food, we get hooked on a lot of these foods because the manufacturers, many of whom are owned by cigarette companies that are experts in addiction, these manufacturers often put in chemicals which are called excitotoxins and other additives that actually increase our desire for these foods. So, for example, if you look at processed foods, they're so loaded with sodium, which is really unhealthy in and of itself. But they're also designed to make us want to eat more and more. So another thing you'll notice is maybe at first, as you switch to a healthier diet, you're going to miss some of the taste enhancers and all that processed food. Like no one can make a milkshake like a fast food place, right?
Right.
You're just not going to be able to quite imitate it, but you can make a pretty good, darn good one at home that will start satisfying you and your kids, and they'll be able to make that transition. Sometimes it's a little rough though, because you're really jonesing for all those taste enhancers and the banquet fried chicken dinners and the cereals with the dyes and the soft drinks with their terrible sugar additives. And one thing to know, since so many people are addicted to diet drinks, is stevia is now being used abundantly for if you are addicted to like Diet Pepsi. Find the brands that have stevia as the sweetener and stay away from the aspartame. Again, it's nature nurture, and if you use that aspartame tainted soft drink, it's going to not only impact your gene health or your epigenetics, but your microbiome, the beneficial bacteria in your gut, which also signal to your genes how to function. So again, you really do want to, you're talking about nature nurture, and a lot of times, as I mentioned, it's 90% nurture, especially as you get older.
Well, and one thing I want to mention is that, it's about the taste. I will tell you this. I used to crave all kinds of junk food before I changed my diet 12 years ago or so. But our bodies are meant to eat good food. We are created to eat good food. So, I crave ribeye steak now. I crave, depending on how much I've exercised for the day, I might crave fruit. Sometimes I'll crave an apple or banana. If I've had a long bike ride, I'll crave that kind of stuff. You got to listen to your body. I crave yogurt, Greek yogurt with berries on it now. It tastes great. But you got to retrain your body to understand that other stuff is junk, and the other stuff, the good whole foods, is what's going to fuel your body and nourish your body.
Exactly. Now, with that ribeye steak, and I'm not going to tell people to be vegetarian or non-vegetarian or any of that. I'm just, whatever your decision, I'm going to make you safer doing it. But and I want folks to know listening, there's a good reason now to buy either organic or grass-fed meat products, and that's because cattle in North America are also implanted with hormones, both estrogen and testosterone, and also progesterone. And these show up in the final cuts, whereas grass-fed beef doesn't get implanted with hormones. And that's a big advantage, because one of the other things that I write about in Raising Healthy Kids, my new book, is that puberty for our daughters is coming at earlier and earlier ages. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Because they're being fed so many meat products now that are just loaded with hormones. And again, the body is exquisitely sensitive to these tiny hormones that you can measure in the parts per billion and trillion. And girls react to it. Boys do too. Polycystic ovarian disease, P syndrome is just one example. Um, Infertility is another big example. So, crave that ribeye, try to make it grass-fed or organic, and it'll be an even healthier craving.
Absolutely. Janet, you had a
Well,
comment.
I got a comment about the animals. I also think I come from a ranch and farming background, and it's more humane as far as I'm concerned, because if you know the rancher and you know how they treat their animals and how they're raised, I mean, personally, I feel that that's really important, and it also tastes better. I can't get past what the flavor is at the store, and I think that comes down to also we train our palate a little bit too over time as to how our fruits and vegetables are raised or picked. I mean, I'm kind of fussy too. Like, I like beets, but I don't like beets that are huge. I like them small. So, you have to realize that food sometimes either has been overgrown or it hasn't been picked correctly. And so, over time, you kind of start honing into that. And I do believe that the organic industry is kind of pushing that a little bit more, because not everything is perfectly sized, right? I mean, you're going to see fruits and vegetables that don't look perfect, but that's how it comes out of the garden. It doesn't come out of the garden. Every single apple is the shape of the same shape and the same size and looks the same. I mean, we have this strange idea that all of our stuff should be just this perfect thing, but that's not how it's made. I mean, that's not organic in my brain. I mean, and that being said, I mean, I feel like too that you lose the quality of the nutrients when you massively produce something and make it huger than what it was intended to be by nature.
Oh yeah, we have have to be aware that organic food is different. Is different, and I want to give my props to organic and conventional farmers. It is difficult to grow food, and America depends on its farmers. And if you've ever tried to grow strawberries, which maybe you have, where you are, it's a little easier. It ain't easy. It ain't easy because the little bugs come in the morning, and then the little bugs come, and then in the morning you wake up and you say, "Oh no, who ate this little strawberry of mine?" So you got to give organic farmers their props for being able to grow so much produce already. The other thing that's really interesting about what you're saying is we created this movement. And I love all the farmers that you're talking about too, but it was consumers, we who are kind of concerned about this stuff and know that the world depends on it, and we're adults, real adults, not the kids over in Washington, D.C. or in our state capitals. Right. We know that we created the organic market. It's not like in the late 90s, the federal government came down and said, "Oh, you know what, people, we're going to give you the organic seal." Right. It was really the other way around, consumer demand saying, "Hey, we want cleaner foods." And as I said, I've been doing this for a long time. There was a time like when you'd go into your supermarket and you'd see signs like NutriClean, "We've scanned this produce for 5 terrible pesticides, and we can guarantee it's free of 5," because there was no organic label then. So we've really moved that market. And not only is it helping to preserve family farms, and there's also something called community sustainable agriculture, which is where you can sign up locally to support your local farms. And it's such a good connection for the kids. You can also go to farmers markets. Take your kids to farmers markets when they're young and let them talk to the growers and hear how they grow their crops, because this connects our kids to the whole system. But it was we who created this market, and it's making a huge difference. In my book, I tell the story of Salinas, California, which is the salad bowl of America. We grow strawberries and lettuce there, and all the schools are carved out of farm fields, for example. And when I would go there in the early 2000s, most of the fields were being sprayed with those organophosphate pesticides. And when I returned to write my book in the during the pandemic, the same fields were now organic. So where you had a school surrounded by fields being sprayed by organophosphate pesticides, kids playing in the playground, and the lettuce right on the other side of the chain link fence with all the chemicals, now it was all organic. And how did these differences happen? Well, I called one of the teachers at the school that I knew. He said it's because of consumers like you and others who are buying all those organic strawberries and all that organic lettuce. So when we do make those kinds of moves in our own life, we're really having a huge impact on our friends and neighbors in towns where we may not even really know the folks, but we really are helping them.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And consumers drive markets everywhere, not just the food industry, but in the healthcare industry. Consumers and free markets is what really makes humans thrive. So people need to know that you basically vote with your pocketbook. Don't support big food, don't support processed food, don't support the fast food places, don't go there. And they will either change their ways or go out of business. And I don't think consumers realize how powerful they really are. So David, as we wrap this podcast up, what do you have a passion for?
Oh, what I'm doing right now is my passion, because you know why? The world depends on it. The survival of our planet depends on it. The products we buy today are often contaminated with the chemicals of global warming, which I now call global boiling. And just for example, I'm trying to get people not to buy so much plastic. Like, don't buy that plastic bottled water anymore, folks. Do filter your water, because all that plastic is being manufactured. I mentioned Cancer Alley. That's where it's being manufactured. And this is where the tires hit the road, because when you buy these products like plastic bottled water, those bottles are being made from petrochemicals that are also part of global warming or global boiling. So our decisions are not only helping us individually and our kids, but we are the ones who are going to be saving the world. If we can, we got to try to do it. This summer was, I don't know how it was for you, but here in California, this was probably the hottest summer on record. The extremes are getting more extreme. And in a few years, we're going to really be having a lot of heat waves where people are dying. They already are, but we're going to see it even, it's already been happening, but it's going to get worse. The only way we can stave this off is through individuals being aware of how important their shopping decisions are. Remember, Uncle Sam's not there to protect you. I'm not gaslighting you. The laws are kind of fake. They don't really protect us. The only adults around are you and me, the people listening, and we've got to be the adults. Our kids depend on it. Our health depends on it. And I'm not being hyperbolic. The survival of the planet depends on our decisions. That's my passion.
Absolutely. So, David, we're going to stream your website here. Tell us a little bit about it. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
RaisingHealthyKidsTheBook.com. And you can also go to Amazon or your local independent bookseller. And there's my beautiful book, Raising Healthy Kids. Put in my name, Raising Healthy Kids, and you can get a copy. All proceeds go to championing our work in the legal area, where we file many lawsuits to promote more consumer disclosure so that those hidden chemical toxins are revealed. And it'll make you a black belt when it comes to protecting yourself and your kids against chemical toxins.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on our show today, David. You've helped us realize our goal, which is to educate and empower consumers to take charge of their own health. So thank you so much.
Be well, and thank you.
Yep. And listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solution with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Thursday to our midweek podcast, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Thank you.